happy about things that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. We talked about it there other Sunday about how they've overturned some laws, some court cases in our land when they overturned Roe v. Wade and how that affected abortion. Didn't ban abortion, but it put the power for the decision of abortion back to the states to make those decisions about that. And we've been happy about that as God's people. One, we're happy because abortion is immoral. It's ungodly. If you don't care about the baby's life, before long you won't care about the handicap and the elderly people's life. When you start disregarding life, where does it end? You know? And so it's immoral and it's murder, and we're glad to see that. And number two, personal thing that makes me happy about it, I'm glad anytime we can see power get kind of put back to the people a little bit. Bringing it back to the state gets it a little more on the local level where we can have more of a voice and help make these decisions for the area we live in. And so I'm happy about that, but there's accusations from our enemies who say that, well, you don't care about babies. You only care about babies in the womb. You don't care about babies out of the womb. There'll be more dangerous, unlawful, illegal abortions performed that will endanger a baby and a woman's life. There'll be more babies in trash cans and abandoned on sides of the roads. And these are very true concerns. But that's where you and I come into play. You see, I'm happy about Roe v. Wade. That's a victory that came by prayer. How many people prayed about that? But our work has really just begun. Now's where we really step up. And I'm not trying to say you, I'm saying me. This is just the challenge that God has challenged me, and I don't know exactly where to start or how it works. But anytime we can help somebody, the Bible said in the book of James, he that knows to do good and does it not, to him it is sin. When I think about babies and having babies, I think about my baby. Where there's a mama and a daddy who love each other and they work and save money and have a decent home and provide food and clothes and things are clean and neat and healthy. But you think about maybe a young girl that's 18 years old and don't have anything. Reckon how she feels about having a baby. Or you think about even a young married couple and they're just maybe living off the assistance of the government or others, and they don't have anything, no education, no job. They don't have any family that's worth anything to help them. How do they feel about having a baby? It's exciting to me, but I guarantee you in a situation like that, you'd be really afraid. And it might be easy to fall for the thought of, well, I'll just have an abortion. We can't do this. We can't handle this. But this is where you and I can help. There's a cause. We can step up and do something. Now, I don't know of anybody right off the top of my head that is in that boat right now. I don't mean I won't meet somebody next week or somebody next month or somebody down the road. I don't know if it's something we can do as a church. It may be something we do as individuals. But anything we can do to be a help. And you maybe have heard me say this, and I used to say it a lot when I worked for the family ministries representing crisis pregnancy. Now, you can be anti-abortion all day long, but are you pro-life? There's a difference. It's easy to go tell people don't have an abortion. But are you willing to give some money or give time, as much as anything? Give some time, energy, and effort. Have some compassion and willing to help some young girl or some young couple that's going to have to try to have this baby. That's the next step. And so I want to encourage us as we see the opportunity to do good. The opportunities to do good. I think sometimes, and maybe my own misunderstanding as a young Christian, as a young preacher, I thought the goal was all about just getting together in here and doing what we can in here and trying to get away from everything out there. Well, I love what we do in here, and what we do in here is a very, very important part, and I look forward to it every time we get together. But our service is done out there. And we're not to isolate ourselves or hide ourselves from the world. If they're ever going to be converted and they're ever going to see the goodness of God, we're going to have to engage with those people. We can't just spend our whole life running from them. And I don't want to be influenced by one of the things that burns me up. I can't stand it when people they'll take a story about Jesus eating with sinners like He's going down there to condone or join in what they were doing. That's not it at all. He went down there with love and mercy. He sat amongst them. He ate amongst them. But He went down there to save them, to change them, to help them, to get them out of that mess they were in. That was their need. That was the cause. That was the action that needed to be taking place. And so the same is true for you and I, to engage these people and not to join in or be influenced by them, but to show them something better, to show them something the world won't show them. Show them kindness. Show them the love of God, the mercy and grace that we preached about this morning. Share it with somebody else. Thought about the goal of our nation we're in right now. It's make another law. I've not looked it up. I've been meaning to, but I'd love to know just how many laws do we have? And how many of them get enforced regularly and consistently across the board? I'm sure we'd be real happy if we only knew. We don't need another law. Another law is not going to solve our problems. We need to deal with the real issue. Man, we are a godless society. People are hard-hearted and stiff-necked, and we've turned our back on the Lord, and our hearts and our minds are failing us and being overcome with evil. People need to get right with God. That's the problem. I think about in the book of Acts, I believe it was at Ephesus, the apostles, when they came to Ephesus, I believe it was Paul and Silas. I can't remember who exactly came to preach there. But when they got there, there was a business there, and it was these silversmiths. And they were making shrines. And the shrine they were making, I don't know what they looked like. I just know they were made of precious stone. They're made of silver. And they make these shrines, and people would buy them, and that was their God. And so you'd go down there to the silversmith and give him a little money. He'd build you this shrine, and you'd take it home and cast all your care on that. And so these apostles came to town and preached them the gospel. They saw a need to act. They saw something, some reason to act, some reason to say something, like David, a cause. And they began to preach the gospel to these people and show them who Jesus is and show them the love of God and preach in the power and demonstrate the power of the Holy Spirit, and people begin to get saved. A great revival breaks out in that land. You know what happened next? The silversmiths, apparently there were several of them, got together and got mad and had a little meeting and said, look, we're getting ready to have to file bankruptcy because ever since these people got saved, they quit buying our shrines. Ever since people found out there was one true living God, nobody has a desire or a need for our false gods. And we're about to lose everything we got. I say all that to say this. The true goal and the true emphasis of our cause, our purpose right now, if we could win people, get people in the house of God, not just get them to church, get them the gospel. Pray for people, get them under conviction. If people get saved, abortion clinics would shut their doors. Because one, we get these young girls at an early age, we'll teach them that God has a plan for marriage. Has a plan for relationships and these things. And they won't be out fornicating and doing these other things. We can help people. We can show them, look, if you got a family and stuff, you work and you provide and you say, we could teach them the Bible and help them. There'd be no need for those things out there. Dry up. Shut the doors. Legalize it if you want to. Nobody's going because nobody's having those problems. You say, well, that's fantasy. We may not be able to save them all, but if we could save some, that's one. And if that one saves one, and that one, you see what I'm saying? And so it starts with us, I will say, in light of that, what we said there in the book of Acts. As soon as they led this revival and the silversmiths, the false gods began to dry up and shut down, then there came retribution, there came a riot. They began to accuse the apostles. They began to bring accusation against God's people. And let me say, we might as well just be ready for that. They that live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer what? Persecution. It's ever important that we understand and know what we believe and why we believe it and be ready to stand up, speak up about it. I mean, it's great to talk about it in here, and I'm for it, and we need it, and that's a big part of it. My goodness, somebody out there might need to know what we believe, who we are, what we believe, who our God is, and what He can do. And so for that, they brought about riot. I thought about all through the Bible. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. We live in this society where they talk about cancel culture. You know, you get on Facebook, you get on the news or whatever, and you speak out against some of these things that are going on. What do they say? We're going to cut you off. That's just all the fulfillment of the Bible as well. We're going to shut you off, and nobody's going to have anything to do with this. More than that, we're going to shame you and demonetize you. We are not the first generation of people to have to deal with that. We think about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They dealt with things like that. We know their story, living in a foreign land, a foreign place that did foreign things, and down there in Babylon. But yet they refused. They saw there was a need and a cause. They refused to defile themselves with the king's meat and the king's wine. They separated themselves, but they didn't isolate themselves. They separated, and come to find out at the end of the time, these men who had believed God and obeyed God and stayed in His will, even in a foreign land, in a foreign society, they were better off than all those who had fell for the ways of the king and the ways of that land. From that time forward, they began to be promoted. I thought about this. I was talking to a young man about this today. I believe one of the best things Christian people can do and things we can do for our young people, make ourselves useful. Be useful. Provide something. Do something. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the king actually liked these people. He didn't believe in their God and didn't worship their God, but yet he still liked them. You say, how you figure? Well, when all these people who didn't like Daniel, who sought to cancel him, made a decree that no prayers should be made to any other God, well, Daniel continued to pray. He still opened his windows toward Jerusalem 3 times a day. He prayed as he always had, always would. They turned him over to the king, and the king didn't even want to put him in that den of lions. And when they did cast him in that den of lions, according to the Bible, the king didn't sleep all night long. And when he came up the next morning and found Daniel still alive, he was happy about it. He had made himself useful. People saw the good, saw the purpose that he was serving. I know I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Jesus talked about salt that has lost its savor. It's not good for anything but to be cast in the dunghill or to be trodden underfoot. And I read in a commentary one time where they talked about being trodden underfoot, and this was kind of their understanding of that, was that how they filled up the cobblestone streets of those ancient cities. They'd take anything to fill up space. Where they'd break up. They didn't have the concrete and the means and resources like we have today. As those streets and those alleyways and walkways would bust up and break up, they'd take anything they could to fill in just anything to throw in that gap to take up space. And I thought, Lord, I don't ever want to be a preacher that just takes up space. I don't want to be the man that gets up here 2 or 3 times a week just to take up 30 minutes at a time of your life. I want to preach you something. I don't ever want to be a building on the side of the road that just takes up space. I want to be powerful. I want to be a light, don't you? I want to make a difference. I want to be useful. I want people to know who I am, what I stand for, the God I believe in, who He is, what He can do. I want to have the power, the glory of God on my life, on my preaching, in our church. I don't ever want to just take up space. Need to be useful. Show people we serve a purpose down here. You may think you'd be better off without us. But what you come to find out, you'd be missing some of the things that we would do. I read in an article one time, there's a fellow, I believe it was a Jewish rabbi, in another state, and then some folks, they were having some kind of controversy in this community, I guess around Christmas time or something, over a nativity scene. Remember, this man's a Jew. So he's not celebrating Christmas with the Christians, but some atheists or unbelievers, they didn't like this nativity scene and all this, and really cracking down, giving the Christians a hard time. Well, this Jew wrote an article in the paper. And in that paper, he said this, I don't understand something. We all have these different religions, we have our different beliefs. But there's something I have to say about my Christian neighbors. And apparently he had 2 or 3 of them in his subdivision. You know, they never cause me any problems. They don't ever cause me any issues or any problems. I never hear them fussing or fighting. I never feel unsafe around them. And then he went on to talk about sometime when he was in trouble, they did something to help him out. I don't know if he was sick or what, but they were there to lend him a helping hand. It'd be good for somebody to know what we do. It's good for people to know what we stand for, what we do. I know there's a bunch of things we don't do, but there's a lot of things we do offer and that we do as well. So I want to be known for something. We go right on in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Men who also, in a strange place, in a strange day, in a strange way, they saw a cause. Obviously, they built this big image and they were supposed to bow to it. And they refused to be compromised. They refused to give in to all the pressure and things that was around them. They weren't afraid to be a little different, to stand up and face what was going on. And so they refused. Again, the king gave them another chance. We'll play it again. We'll play the music again. We'll give you a second chance to bow. And they would not bow. Their response was this: we know God's able to deliver out of this fiery furnace that you're going to put us in. But even if He does it, we're not going to stop. In other words, we're not going to bow down. We're not going to cave into this. And that's what we need right now. We need some people who, we know God can do all things, everything, and can take care, but regardless of the outcome, we're not giving up. We're not throwing in the towel. We're not shutting our doors. We're not changing our message. We're not going to stop praying. We're not going to stop revival. We're not going to stop asking people to come to church. We're not going to stop talking to people about a relationship with the Lord. It may upset you, you may not like it, but it's okay. Because we know God. Whether He delivers us or not, we're not going to bow because God is able. We're going to keep on going. You know the story, how they were cast into a furnace that was heated up, I believe several times hotter than initially. But yet as they looked in, they saw not 3 men, but they saw a 4th man in there with them. And it made a difference. When they pulled them out of there, not only had they endured the flames and the fire, they didn't even smell of smoke. It's amazing. And even there, the king's heart was touched. He said, let their God be our God. Hey, let's reverence this God of theirs. Let's hear about this God of theirs. He's useful. They're useful. And they're doing something. There's something to what they've got. And I want people to know that. There's something to what we got. It's more than just Sunday religion. It's more than just a few things that we don't do. It's things we don't do, but there's a reason we don't do them. We understand that God's commandments are beneficial. They're good. There's things that not only we don't do, there's things that we do and things that we do offer. There's a God full of grace and mercy and love tonight. He's given you and I the opportunity to serve and to do. The last thing I want to do is see a bunch of false accusers, people who want to frown on the church and criticize the church. I don't want them to turn out to be right. In other words, I don't want to see the increase, and I'll just tell you, and you probably feel about the same way, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the news, because they just tell you whatever they want to tell you anyway most of the time. No matter if it's true or not. Just tell you whatever they want to tell you. But I'd hate to see the number of abandoned babies and murdered women because of illegal abortions and things. I don't want to see that. I don't think nobody here would. And I tell you, if we can't get hands on, we may not know somebody. Whatever. Let's just pray real hard for our nation. Pray for those who are trying to make a difference. And I'm glad we got foreign missions on foreign soil, and I'm going to say something about him in just a moment. But we need some missionaries here at home too. People on a mission. People out to do something. And wow, a lot of times I know we talk about prayer being sort of seems like that's the last thing, the least we can do. Prayer is the greatest thing we can do. And before we do anything else, we ought to be prayerful and be mindful tonight of those things. So let's pray real hard, and let's pray for revival. We've been talking more and more about that. I want something to make a lasting effect, something to make a lasting difference. And I believe God's able to send that. And I will say, I know revival, when we say revival, my mind goes toward the church to revive something that is dead. Well, I'm going to tell you this. I don't think we're a dead church. I've been a part of one of them, a couple of them. We're not. I think we got a good church. I'm glad to be at a church. I'm not ashamed. I'm not afraid to ask anybody to come be here. I'm glad to ask people to come up here. I don't say it right off, I don't think we're dead. But we can always stand a little growth. Always stand to move up. I don't think we're dead, and I don't think we've got one foot in the grave. I know we maybe not turned down the walls, having to build on, but I'll tell you what, the crew we got, it's a good crew. And I love them, and I'm glad to be. I was bragging on you and my father-in-law and some family today. Just how much we love this church, how great things people are up here, man. I do. So I don't want to think we're dead, but we can always stand a little growth. So that's one thing, the first thing I guess I think about in revival. But ultimately, too, God can save people during a revival. And in fact, if the church is really prayed up and seeking it and fired up, it won't take much to get the church called up, and lost people will be drawn in to be saved. We can always stand to grow, but I don't know why it is sometimes. There's some people that wouldn't hardly come up here on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night, but you tell them we're having like a revival, and for some reason they'd come. I don't know. I'm praying real hard that God will save people in this meeting. I mean, I want to get something. I like to get stirred up by the preaching and the singing, and I tell you what, nothing else, just being together all week helps me. We get in here and get to doing this together and get one heart, one mind, one accord, and that part of it just helps me. And I'm looking for my part of that. But I really want to see people get saved. I want to see people be born again. We've been praying for family members and children and grandchildren and friends for a couple years since I've been here some. And I'd love to see this meeting be the meeting those people get things right with God. And I believe He can do it. Let's labor and let's pray real hard. Pray real hard about that. And that I feel like God's leading me a certain way about something, so you just pray. And I know I'm an analytical mind. A lot of times I say I try to err on the side of caution and things. I am careful as I can be. I don't want to do anything within myself. I like that old song that said, Lord, I don't want to do one thing on my own. Put me where you want me, Lord, right where I belong. That's my prayer. That's the way I want to live. So you help us pray about that. And then another thing, too, we supporting the Trot family over in Papua New Guinea. Some of you may have received an email. They're celebrating, just in the past month or so, they've celebrated 1 year of being there. And so they've got their orientation parts in. They've spent some time out in what they call the bush or the rural, kind of native scenery. They had actually got to go back to the capital city they have there. There's a city there, and they got to go spend some time. While they were there, they received some solar power, some solar equipment, which they're going to be able to take back to their place out in this rural, native, undeveloped area. And they're going to be able to use that there in their little hut, little house that they have out there as a little form of electricity and things. And I'm pretty sure if I were out there, any kind of electricity would be greatly appreciated. So they were really celebrating that, and they've been working on some projects, helping the communities there build some buildings, and I believe working on maybe a little school and things like that. And so they just wanted everybody to mention to their churches and supporters how much they really appreciated the support and the backing of 1 year, and they're getting closer to that point where they can actually get out, get in the field. And I think the big part of what kind of holds it up is the language barriers and things, because you get into these undeveloped and these uncivilized territories, they have tribal language, like language nobody even knows, seen, heard, and a lot of times they have to figure out and learn how to navigate that, and that can be one of the biggest things is they learn to try to translate the Bible into that tribal kind of language. And so I had a missionary tell me one time, one of the saddest things he ever saw was, and I don't know where they were at or who they were dealing with, if it was somewhere in Africa or what, but anyway, they were trying to talk with this group of people, and they had a translator, and they did not have a Bible. I think they spoke Swahili or something like that, and they did not have a Bible in their translation. They didn't have any parts of the Bible translated, and they didn't have anything to give to them. And when the people asked about this book he had, and they wanted one, and they said, well, we don't have one in your language. And he said, that ended it right there. And it was as if though they sort of thought, well, if your God can't speak our language, then he's probably not much use to us. We take it for granted that we've got this. I do. And, God, your original Bible wasn't written in English. I'm pretty sure you know that. Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, all these things. Boy, hadn't God been good to have his hand on all this? We could get a copy of it in our language where we could read it to understand it. And that's good to have it in the language. And then more than that, he's given us the Spirit to interpret it and understand it and apply it to our lives and things. So let's do pray for our missionary over there. He wanted to tell everybody how much they really appreciate all the support. Let's all stand.